Hi everyone, welcome to Physics 267, Probability, Statistics, and Data Analysis for Physics and Astronomy. This is the first year that this course is being run in the Department of Physics and Astronomy, and I do hope that you enjoy the course and find it useful at the end because there's a lot of information that we're going to go through to help with data analysis in your future. In this first chapter, we're simply going to go through a course overview, what the key deliverables are, what the expected schedule is for each week, who your teaching team is, as well as the grading scheme. We're going to end up with some terminology that will be used for the rest of the course, and we'll go on from there. So in this video, we're first going to go through an overview of Physics 267 and your teaching team for the term, why Physics 267 is important, as well as an overview of how to download Jupyter Notebook through Anaconda. You are allowed to use any install of Jupyter Notebook that you prefer, whether it's using Google Colab or the University of Waterloo's math server for Jupyter Notebook. But as long as you have access to one of them, you will be able to proceed through the course using a mixture of Markdown text and Python code. Now, the main content for this lecture is really just giving you a big overview of the course, what the big picture is for data analysis, our overall approach, as well as different terminology for variables and data. So let's first start off with the introduction, which means we're going to go through the course outline and syllabus, teaching team, grading distribution, key deliverables, and weekly schedule, as well as a term project. So for the course outline, first of all, you can find the outline on Learn. Definitely read through it to ensure that you have all of the details that are required. There's going to be a quiz about it next week, so please make sure that you do read it so that you're prepared for that quiz. Keep in mind, it's just a quiz that's for a completion grade. The goal for the course is to be able to analyze data from examples in physics and astronomy, so I will be trying my best to give you real-life data sets to work with throughout the term. And as each term progresses, when we teach this course, we'll have a larger collection of different data sets for you to practice on. So first, the goal is to figure out the terminology, to go through probability, to go through statistics, so that you have all the tools required to perform proper data analysis on these examples. For each week, there's going to be pre-recorded lectures like this one that are accompanied by Jupyter workbooks. So the lectures are going to be succinct, condensed versions of the text given in the Jupyter workbook or notebook. I highly suggest that you read the workbooks first and then watch the videos. Those workbooks do have practice problems in them. They are to be submitted at the end of each week for correctness and completion grades. The practice problems will be covered during live lectures on WebEx on a weekly basis. So please make sure you attend the live lectures or watch the recordings for the live lectures so that you can stay up to date on all the material that is presented each week. There are going to be office hours and regular support that's run through Discord. So please make sure that you do sign up for Discord so that you can participate in the course, share your code, ask questions, debug with your peers. If you do not have access to Discord, that's totally fine as well. I'll be monitoring my email really regularly, and you can use Microsoft Teams to connect with me directly. So for the teaching team, I'll be your instructor for this term. My name is Dr. Brenda Lee. You can reach me at brenda.lee@uwaterloo.ca or through Discord, and my office hours are either going to be upon request or during scheduled times on a regular basis throughout polls. So usually I'll have an increased number of office hours leading up to the midterm and final assessments or throughout the term for your project. Your teaching assistants for this term are going to be Arena and Brady. Their emails are in the PDF and in the PowerPoint documentation, and also in the course outline. You can reach them anytime when it comes to grading assignments or if you have a grading dispute. So the teaching assistants will also be helping with support throughout Discord, so you can use that as well to reach out to them. So if you have questions about who to reach out to throughout the term, you can kind of use this. If you have different concepts, or if you have different questions about concepts, or if you need an accommodation for something, reach out to your instructor directly, which is me. If you have issues about assignments or grading, then you would reach out to the TAs, Arena or Brady. If you don't know who to reach out to, then you can just end up contacting me, where I can redirect you or answer your question directly. So for the grading distribution, it's a very simple distribution. Every week there's going to be a completion grade, and that makes up 10% of your overall grade. So the completion grade is split up into two components. You have your readiness quizzes at the beginning of each week, which test you on the concepts learned in the previous week. It's completion only, but all of these quizzes are going to be very useful moving forward for the midterm and final assessments. It's all multiple choice through Learn. Then you have Jupyter workbooks. These are notebooks that I've typed up myself with the help of various textbooks and different content that I've learned myself. After you read the workbook, at the very end, there's going to be multiple practice problems that you can look at and do yourself. Now, you can do them yourself and submit them for correctness and completion grades, or you can attend the live lecture if you're stuck, or double check your answers through the recording and finish those by the end of the week for the 5% completion grade. So there are only 3 possible marks for these workbooks. Let me just reiterate these two. For the readiness quiz, it's either you do it or you don't. So it's either a 0 or a 1 Boolean type of grade. For the Jupyter workbooks, you have a completion or correctness grade. So in that case, if there are multiple problems, if you finish all of them and most of them are correct, you should get 2 out of 2. If you complete most of them and you don't finish all of them, then you're going to get 1 out of 2. If you complete all of them and many of them are wrong, then you're going to get 1 out of 2 as well. Then if you do not complete them or hand them in on time, or if you barely have any complete, less than 50% complete, then you're going to receive a 0 out of 2. So there's only 3 possible values to get for the Jupyter workbooks: 0, 1, and 2 out of 2. Outside of that, you have the assignments that are done on a weekly basis. These are worth a lot more. You're allowed to collaborate with others, but you have to submit them individually. So if you have problems with your code and you're stuck and you can't run your code and you need help with debugging, that's when you can go onto Discord to seek help from your peers and the teaching team. Now, leading up to the midterm and final assessment, it's going to be the exact same thing as what you've experienced throughout the week for each week prior to that. So overall, throughout the week, you're going to get a quiz to test you on previous content. You're going to get a Jupyter workbook to test you and practice current content. And you're going to get assignments to practice current content. During the midterm assessment, it's just another regular week, but your quiz is going to be worth more. You're not allowed to collaborate anymore. It's no longer a completion grade. And there's going to be 1 assignment where you're not allowed to work with anybody. So your midterm assessment is simply 1 quiz plus 1 assignment for that week that you have to do all by yourself. And it's going to be cumulative in terms of all of the concepts learned up to that point. Your final assessment, pretty much exactly the same. It's going to be the last full week of the term, and it'll include 1 quiz and 1 assignment, and it's going to cover all of the content from the midterm up to the final assessment point. So those 2 will serve as your midterm and final grades. They're worth a lot more at 25% each, these 2. And the last component is a final project. That final project is actually fairly fun to work with. I'll be giving you some additional details later on in this lecture and throughout the term, but there is a 3% bonus that you can achieve from that course, from this project. So just to recap, some key deliverables throughout the week. At the beginning of the week, read the Jupyter notebook, workbooks first and try the practice problems yourself. Complete the readiness quiz starting in the second week to test you on knowledge of concepts learned in the previous week. In the middle of the week, attend the live lectures through WebEx to help with the practice problems. and to just finish them off and submit them so that you're done the workbooks for the week. You can work on the assignments and ask for help during the live lecture or during office hours on Wednesdays. These assignments are to be done individually. Collaboration is allowed, but no copying, or else, unfortunately, I would have to report you as a Policy 71 offense. At the end of the week, you have to have finished your Jupyter workbooks and submit them. They're basically those practice problems that we'll have already finished during the live lectures, and also submit your assignments for that week. And throughout the term, you just have to work on your term project. And one thing, you don't have to worry about it until after midterms because you will not have enough tools in your arsenal to tackle the term project until after that. So for the term project, it's very closely tied to the name of the course: probability, statistics, and data analysis for physics and astronomy. Essentially, you can work individually or in groups of 2 to 3. Just keep in mind that if you do work in groups of 2 to 3, you're expected to do more analysis on your data sets. So during the term, around the middle of the term, I'll be releasing a folder on Learn called Project, and you'll be given access to many different types of data sets from different fields of physics and astronomy, whether it be quantum physics, whether it be astrophysics, biophysics, physics education research, and additional types of data sets. Within each one, you'll have an overview of how that data was collected, as well as the data that was collected, as well as any references that will help with the report. Your job is to go through those data sets, read them, read the descriptions, go through those references, and come up with your own analysis of the data to present graphs, to perform statistical analysis on, and hypothesis testing on, and to draw conclusions from your results. So that is essentially the goal of the whole course, to be able to apply all the tools that we've learned to analyze data. Now for some information about Jupyter Notebook. You will have to know how to work with Jupyter Notebook and .ipynb files for this course, similar to previous courses that you've taken as a prerequisite. You can install Jupyter Notebook through Anaconda. Make sure you download the correct version of Anaconda for Windows, Apple, or Linux. And keep in mind that Anaconda is considered a Python distribution. If you use Anaconda, it doesn't just install Jupyter Notebook, it installs Python and various other Python packages and libraries that will be handy for data science in general. The key ones that we'll be using for this course would be NumPy, SciPy, Matplotlib, Pandas, stats models, and Seaborn. So we might not use all of them, but they're all very useful when it comes to statistical analysis. But we'll cover those as we progress throughout the term. So let's go through the main content. It's going to be very short. We're going to go through the big picture, an overall approach to data analysis, and some terminology for variables in data. So for the big picture for this course, let's start with our end goal. The end goal is data analysis. Data analysis is a process of collecting, modeling, and analyzing data to extract insights and make predictions based on interpreted results. It's a lot. And the methods of data analysis do require the application of mathematical statistics. So that means we need to know statistics before we even approach data analysis. Moving towards statistics, that's based on observations and how we infer and interpret such results. So that requires us to understand statistical tests. And in order to understand statistical tests, we need to understand probability. So being able to know the different terms for probability, the different tests for probability and uncertainty, that is required to understand the significance of statistical tests. Because when we perform statistical tests, we end up with values such as p-values, which is the probability of something like a hypothesis taking place. So that means we first have to take a step backwards and understand probability. Now, probability is the language of uncertainty that will allow us to interpret the results that we get from statistical tests. Probability will allow us to describe numerically how likely an event is to occur, or if a proposition is true. But even before that, before we tackle probability, we have to understand how data is collected and how it is presented and described. So a big part of the first chapters of the course is being able to present data properly and then being able to apply probability and statistical tests to that data. Now, in terms of data analysis, throughout the course, we're going to try and go through all of these different components to data analysis. Now, we won't really touch on this until the very end, but it's very good to first start out with an understanding of what we're trying to achieve. So first of all, when we're doing data analysis, if you are an experimental physicist, you are going to have to go through experimental design. So that means we have to be able to formulate a hypothesis, design an experiment, and create a sampling routine that is effective and unbiased. So in terms of that, when we're talking about experimental design, it applies to certain types of fields and it applies to certain types of experiments that we do. Once we have that, we can go on to data collection. For data collection, we're going to have to optimize our collection method to reduce error and bias. We're going to have to introduce controls, and we're going to have to carry out the data collection. After we have all of our data, whether it's through theoretical modeling means or whether it's through an experiment, we move on to our statistics. There can be two types of statistics. We have descriptive statistics, which helps us generate statistics based on the visualization of data. So that would be different probability distributions, like a Gaussian distribution, or maybe a Poisson distribution, things like that. That'll depend on what your data set looks like. We then have inferential statistics. That's where we discuss patterns, differences, and help characterize our data set through what we see. Then we have estimation. Once we have all of the patterns from our sample, we are able to estimate patterns in the population and make predictions and create models to represent our data set. The last part is hypothesis testing. So once you have all of your data and you're able to describe it and model it properly, you can test it through hypothesis testing. So we can apply different statistical tests to determine any causative effects or differences between groups and find significance through our test. Now, without a proper approach to data analysis, our conclusions are usually unreliable. And by doing a proper approach to data analysis, it's way better than typical anecdotal evidence. So just to define anecdotal evidence, we would have evidence based on reports and testimonials from people. For example, I feel like this movie was the greatest versus someone else saying this movie was the worst. That is anecdotal evidence where it's fairly biased based on the group of people that you usually hang out with who may have the same types of preferences. Now, let's go on to variables in data, some key terminology. When we're discussing statistics, we have to introduce the concept of sampling. When you collect a sample, which is a set of data points from a population, which is a large body of measurements, the goal is to predict the behavior of the population by analyzing data from a representative sample. If your sample isn't big enough, it means that you can't make a proper prediction to represent the population. And being able to figure out how big of a sample you need is one of the things we'll talk about in this course as well. Now, a variable is a measurable characteristic that changes, and you can get data points from that variable based on something that you're changing. So if you can measure one variable from your sample, you have univariate data. If you can measure two variables from your sample, such as temperature and location, then you have bivariate data. If you have if you can measure multiple different variables from your sample, 3 or more, then you have multivariate data. So this is something that we will be discussing as we proceed through descriptive statistics in future chapters. But first of all, I do want to go through this graph. When we're collecting data, there's two types. There's going to be qualitative data that we can collect, which could be categorized into categories or groups. You can have quantitative data that you collect, which is numerical data. So a good example between the two would be for qualitative, you're looking at age groups. Maybe you're looking at what happens between ages 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15. So that type of data or parameter is qualitative. Then you have quantitative, which is looking at the exact age of a person. So the age can be 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth in years. And in terms of that, it can be discrete or it can be continuous. So if you're looking at the year, the yearly age of a person, then you have discrete values where you're only looking at integer values. It can be 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're looking at months or if you're looking at seconds, in which defines a person's age, then you're looking at a continuous data set where the numbers do have decimals and they become more and more accurate as you go down in what you're measuring. So just keep that in mind. We are going to go through this in future chapters, but it is very important when we are looking at different data sets to be able to categorize them in terms of where they lie on this chart. Is the parameter or the variable that you're looking at qualitative or quantitative? If it's qualitative, then just leave it as that. If it's quantitative, then we have to determine whether it's discrete or continuous. Okay, so let's now move on to the summary. So what did we learn in this lecture? Not too much. We basically learned what to do in this course and what we have to do to get grades in this course, as well as know the different types of variables and data that we can collect. So in terms of what you should understand moving forward, basically, please make sure you have Jupyter Notebook through Anaconda or a local install if you prefer it. Make sure that you have that up and running by the end of the first week and at the latest the second week, just so that you don't have any more technical difficulties throughout the term. Brush up on your basic Python skills. I'll be providing a quick review of all different Python skills at the beginning of the week. Understand the big picture for data analysis and what we're trying to achieve in this course. Understand the grading scheme, understand the key deliverables of the course, and familiarize yourself with the terms that were presented in the lecture. And apart from that, the first week is fairly easy. Make sure you set aside time each week to go through the workbooks, the lecture videos, if you so choose, as well as attend the live lectures and office hours for support if you're stuck.